The letter trembled in my hands as I stared at the words that would change everything. You've always held me back. Lonnie's handwriting, usually so precise and controlled, was messy and rushed, like he couldn't wait to get the words out, to get away from me. My name is Catherine, and after 15 years of marriage, my husband left me for another woman via a letter on our kitchen counter. The coward couldn't even say it to my face. I sat at our marble island, the one we'd picked out together during the renovation 3 years ago, and read the letter again. The house felt too quiet, too empty. The ticking of the antique clock Lonnie's mother had given us for our 10th anniversary seemed to mock me with each second. My phone buzzed. Lexi's name flashed across the screen. My cousin, my best friend since childhood. Have you heard from Lonnie? Her voice was careful, measured. Oh, I've heard from him all right. I smoothed the letter against the counter. He left me a goodbye note like I'm some kind of roommate he's trying to dodge rent from. What? Catherine, I'm coming over. 20 minutes later, Lexi burst through my front door, still in her yoga clothes, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She took one look at me and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like lavender and sweat. Tell me everything, she said, pulling back to study my face. I handed her the letter. Her eyes widened as she read, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the paper. That bastard, she whispered. And Vanessa Clark, the socialite. I jerked my head up. How did you know about Vanessa? Lexi's face flushed. I saw them together at LeBlanc last week. I was going to tell you, but I wanted to be sure first. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You knew? For a whole week? Catherine, Get out. My voice was eerily calm. Please, let me explain. Get out! I screamed, surprising us both. After Lexi left, I wandered through the house like a ghost, touching things that suddenly felt foreign. Photos of Lonnie and me smiled back at me from every wall, lies frozen in time. I grabbed the nearest frame and hurled it across the room. The glass shattered satisfyingly against the wall. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Camden, my old college friend who'd recently moved back to town. Catherine, Lexi called me. Are you okay? I laughed bitterly. Define okay. I'm bringing wine and pizza, no arguments. An hour later, Camden and I sat on my kitchen floor, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and wine bottles. I'd told him everything, including Lexi's betrayal. You know what the worst part is? I took another sip of wine. He's probably at Vanessa's right now, in her mansion, laughing about how he finally broke free from his ball and chain. Then he's an idiot, Camden said firmly. And he'll realize it too late. I was about to respond when something caught my eye. A corner of yellowed paper peeking out from behind the fallen photo I'd thrown earlier. I crawled over and pulled it free. What's that? Camden asked. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. It's from my Aunt Victoria. She died last year. I scanned the contents, my heart beginning to race. Camden, this doesn't make sense. She mentions an inheritance, something valuable she left for me, but I never received anything after her death. What exactly does it say? I read aloud. My dearest Catherine, when the time comes, remember that true wealth lies in the safe behind the portrait. The combination is the date we first met, the day you changed my life. With love, Victoria. Camden leaned forward. The portrait? What portrait? I stood up, suddenly energized despite the wine. Her self-portrait, the one she willed to me that's been in storage since her death. My mind was racing. Camden, help me make some calls. I need to find that painting. As I dialed the storage facility's number, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since finding Lonnie's letter, I felt something other than despair, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Or maybe it was revenge. The storage facility was a maze of identical metal doors, our footsteps echoing off concrete floors. The manager, a balding man named Pete, led us to Unit 247. Here it is, ma'am, just like you left it last year. I fumbled with the key, my hands trembling slightly. Camden stood beside me, coffee in hand, We'd both needed it after last night's wine session. The door creaked open, revealing stacks of boxes and furniture draped in white sheets. The portrait was easy to spot, propped against the back wall. Aunt Victoria's piercing eyes seemed to follow me as I approached. "That's quite something," Camden whispered, helping me lift the heavy frame. We carefully carried it to my SUV. Back at home, we positioned it in the living room, where sunlight streamed through the windows. I studied the ornate frame, running my fingers along its edges. There has to be a mechanism or... My voice trailed off as I felt a slight click. The frame swung forward, revealing a small wall safe behind it. "Damn," Camden breathed. "Your aunt wasn't kidding." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos until I found what I needed. A picture from my 16th birthday, the day I first met Victoria. "July 18th, 1998, I muttered, turning the dial. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside was a leather portfolio and an envelope addressed to me. My hand shook as I opened the letter. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've solved my little puzzle. What you hold in your hands is the truth about our family's legacy, specifically your inheritance. I've kept these documents hidden because I knew certain people would try to prevent you from receiving what's rightfully yours. The portfolio contains proof of your ownership of significant shares in Victoria's Secret Gardens, the company your grandfather and I built together. These shares were meant for you on your 21st birthday, but your father's gambling debts complicated things. I've spent years legally protecting this inheritance for you. Contact Jarrett Evans. He's been my lawyer for 20 years and knows everything. Trust him. Love, always, Victoria." I sat heavily on the couch, staring at the documents. Victoria's Secret Gardens was one of the largest luxury spa chains in the country. The shares in my hands were worth millions. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Lexi. "Catherine, please, we need to talk." I ended the call without answering and immediately dialed the number for Jarrett Evans that was paperclipped to the documents. "Jarrett Evans speaking. Mr. Evans, this is Catherine Benson. I just found some documents from my Aunt Victoria." There was a pause. "I've been waiting for this call for over a year, Catherine. Can you come to my office today?" 2 hours later, Camden and I sat in a sleek downtown office while Jarrett, a distinguished man in his 40s, examined the documents. "Everything appears to be in order," he said, looking up. "Victoria was very thorough. These shares represent a 30% ownership in Victoria's Secret Gardens. She arranged everything so they couldn't be touched by your father's creditors or any future claims." "Future claims?" I asked. "Such as a divorce settlement," he said pointedly. My heart skipped a beat. "How did she know?" "Victoria was an excellent judge of character. She never trusted Lonnie." He leaned forward. "Catherine, there's something else you should know. Vanessa Clark has been trying to acquire controlling interest in the company for months. These shares would prevent that from happening." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "You mean the same Vanessa Clark who's sleeping with my husband?" "The very same." Jarrett's expression matched mine. "Would you like to know how we can proceed?" Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Lexi. "Had lunch with Vanessa today. She's not the monster you think she is. Give her a chance?" I showed the message to Camden, who whistled low. "Looks like your cousin's picked her side." I turned to Jarrett, my decision made. "Tell me everything I need to know, and then we're going to make some changes." As Jarrett outlined our strategy, I felt a surge of energy I hadn't experienced since finding Lonnie's letter. My aunt hadn't just left me money, she'd left me power, and I intended to use it. "One more thing," Jarrett said, pulling out another envelope. "Victoria left this for you too. She said to give it to you once you found everything else." I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photo. Victoria, at my age, standing proud in front of her first spa location. On the back, she'd written, "Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Make them regret underestimating you." I tucked the photo into my purse, my aunt's words burning into my mind. Oh, they would regret it. They would regret it all. The charity gala was in full swing when I walked in, wearing a black dress that cost more than my old monthly budget. Heads turned. They always did when someone entered the crystal ballroom. But this time, the whispers that followed were different. "Is that Catherine? Lonnie's ex? I heard she—" I smiled, remembering Jarrett's words from our strategy meeting. Let them talk. Every whisper works in our favor. Camden appeared at my elbow, handsome in his tuxedo. "Ready to make some waves?" "Born ready." I accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Is she here?" "Northwest corner. With Lexi." I turned casually, spotting them immediately. Vanessa held court near the windows, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most cars. Lexi stood beside her, laughing at something she'd said. The sight made my stomach turn. "Catherine," a familiar voice called out. Margaret, the gala's organizer and an old family friend, hurried over. "I'm so glad you came." "And is it true about you taking over your aunt's position on the board?" I nodded, noting how the nearby conversation suddenly quieted. "Yes, I'm attending my first board meeting next week." "How wonderful!" Margaret's voice carried perfectly. "Victoria would be so proud. She always said you were the only one who truly understood her vision for the company." From the corner of my eye, I saw Vanessa's head snap in our direction. Bingo. My phone buzzed. A text from Jarrett. "Documents filed. Everything set for Monday." "Excuse me," a smooth voice interrupted. Vanessa stood before us, Lexi hovering anxiously behind her. "Catherine, darling, we simply must catch up." "Must we?" I took a deliberate sip of champagne. "I insist." Her perfectly manicured hand gripped my arm, steering me toward a quiet corner. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling sleeping with my husband?" "Ex-husband," she corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And really, I did you a favor. Lonnie was never meant for small-town life." "How thoughtful of you." I matched her smile. "Speaking of favors, how's your acquisition going? I heard there were some complications." The flash of anger in her eyes was worth every second of the past month's pain. "Catherine," Lexi stepped forward, "please don't make this difficult. Vanessa's offering to buy your shares at well above market value." I turned to my cousin, feeling a fresh wave of betrayal. "And how long have you been her errand girl, Lexi? Was it before or after she started sleeping with my husband?" Lexi flinched. "That's not fair. I'm trying to help everyone get what they want." "What I want?" I laughed softly. "What I want is for my cousin to remember who she is. What I want is for my husband's mistress to realize she's not as clever as she thinks she is." "Listen here, you little—" Vanessa started, but I cut her off. "No, you listen. Those shares aren't for sale. Not now, not ever. And on Monday, when the board announces the new majority shareholder, you'll understand exactly why my aunt chose me to carry on her legacy." I turned to leave, but Vanessa grabbed my arm again. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," I pulled free, "I do. I'm dealing with a woman who's leveraged herself to the hilt trying to buy up company shares, not realizing Victoria had already secured the controlling interest. I'm dealing with someone who thought seducing my husband would somehow give her an advantage in business negotiations. How's that working out for you, by the way?" The color drained from her face. Behind her, Lexi's eyes widened. "Catherine," Lexi reached for me. "I didn't know—" "Save it." I stepped back. "You chose your side. Now live with it." I walked away, feeling their stares burning into my back. Camden met me halfway across the room. "That looked intense," he said, guiding me toward the exit. "It was necessary." I checked my phone as another text came through, this time from my bank. The transfer was complete. Victoria's inheritance was officially mine. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. A familiar car pulled up, Lonnie's Mercedes. He stepped out, straightening his tie. "Catherine?" He stopped short, taking in my appearance. "You look different. Amazing what self-respect does for a woman's appearance." I smiled sweetly. Enjoy the party. I hear Vanessa could use a drink. As Camden and I walked to our car, I heard the ballroom doors open behind us. Vanessa's voice carried across the parking lot. Lonnie, we need to talk. Now. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The sound of their arguing told me everything I needed to know. Victoria was right. Sometimes the best revenge is simply watching karma do its work. And karma was just getting started. The boardroom at Victoria's Secret Gardens headquarters felt like an arena. 14 pairs of eyes watched me take my seat at the massive mahogany table. Jarrett sat to my right, a reassuring presence in an expensive suit. Before we begin, Vanessa announced from the other end of the table, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. She smiled tightly. Catherine's unexpected inheritance. Is there something specific you'd like to discuss? I kept my voice level, remembering Jarrett's coaching. Just wondering about the timing. It seems convenient that these shares suddenly appeared right when I was close to acquiring majority control. An older board member, Robert, cleared his throat. The shares were never hidden, Ms. Clark. Victoria was quite clear about her succession plans. Which you'd know, I added, if you'd done proper due diligence before trying to hostile take over my family's company. The door burst open. Lonnie stormed in, his face red. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Mr. Benson, Jarrett stood smoothly. This is a private board meeting. You'll need to leave. Like hell I will. Catherine, what game are you playing? I remained seated, maintaining eye contact with Vanessa. Security, please escort my ex-husband from the premises. 2 guards appeared almost immediately. Lonnie struggled as they led him out, his voice echoing down the hallway. You can't do this to me. Actually, I finally turned to face the door. I can. And I just did. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table. That was unnecessary. Like sleeping with my husband while trying to steal my aunt's company. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Others tried to hide their smirks. Let's focus on business, Robert suggested, clearly enjoying the drama. Catherine, you called this meeting. The floor is yours. I opened my laptop, connecting it to the projector. Thank you. I've reviewed our operations, and I've identified several areas where we're falling short of Victoria's original vision. For the next hour, I laid out my plans. New wellness programs, community outreach initiatives, employee profit sharing. With each slide, I watched Vanessa's expression grow darker. This is absurd, she finally interrupted. These programs will cut into our profit margins. Actually, Jarrett distributed some documents. Our projections show increased customer loyalty and employee retention will more than offset the initial investment. My phone buzzed. A text from Camden. TV crews outside. Story about Vanessa's failed takeover hitting news at 6. I smiled. Which brings me to our final point, public relations. Vanessa's face went pale. She glanced at her own phone, likely seeing the same news alerts I'd planned with Jarrett. This meeting is over, she stood abruptly. My lawyers will... Will what? I asked softly. Contest the legitimate inheritance of shares. Question Victoria's mental state when she made her will. Go ahead, the publicity will be fascinating. The boardroom door opened again. This time, Lexi walked in, holding a manila envelope. What are you doing here? Vanessa snapped. Lexi avoided her gaze, walking straight to me. I found these in your old house. Thought you should have them. I opened the envelope. Inside were documents showing Vanessa's attempts to pressure Victoria into selling before her death, including some very aggressive emails. Thank you, Lexi. I meant it. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Catherine. I didn't know about any of it. Lexi! Vanessa's voice cracked like a whip. Remember what we discussed? My cousin straightened her spine. Yes, I do. I remember everything we discussed, including your plans to force Catherine out once you had control. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Vanessa grabbed her bag, practically running for the door. This isn't over. Actually, I called after her, it is. Security will show you out, permanently. After she left, Robert stood up, applauding. Others joined in. Victoria would be proud, he said. Welcome home, Catherine. Later, in my new office, Victoria's old office, Lexi and I sat across from each other, the weight of months of betrayal between us. I was stupid, she whispered. So stupid. Yes, you were. I poured us both some tea, but you came through in the end. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about Victoria's words. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. It'll take time, I said honestly, but we're family. Real family, not whatever game Vanessa was playing. My phone buzzed again. A news alert. Socialite's failed takeover attempt leads to major stock losses. I showed it to Lexi, who let out a low whistle. What happens now? Now? I looked around the office, at Victoria's portrait on the wall, at the city skyline beyond the windows. Now we build something better, together. The tea was perfect, Victoria's special blend. Everything was exactly as it should be. The renovation of Victoria's Secret Gardens flagship location was in full swing when Camden found me in the construction zone, hard hat in place, reviewing blueprints with the contractors. You need to see this, he said, holding up his tablet. The headline read, Power Couples Fall from Grace. Vanessa Clark files for bankruptcy. Lonnie Benson named in financial investigation. Karma works faster than I expected, I mused, directing a worker where to place a support beam. That's not all. Camden scrolled down. Apparently, Vanessa's been running a Ponzi scheme through her investment firm. Your aunt's shares weren't the only things she was trying to acquire illegally. A familiar voice interrupted us. Catherine, do you have a minute? Lexi stood in the doorway, clutching a stack of folders. Since her confession in the boardroom 2 weeks ago, she'd been working overtime to prove her loyalty, helping me implement Victoria's vision for the company. The women's shelter called, she said. They want to know if we're still on for the partnership program. Absolutely. I handed the blueprints to the contractor. Set up a meeting for tomorrow and get Maria from HR involved. We'll need to start training their residents for our apprenticeship program. My phone rang. Jarrett's name flashed on the screen. Catherine, turn on the news, now. Camden already had his tablet ready. We huddled around it as the reporter spoke. Sources say Vanessa Clark attempted to flee the country this morning, but was detained at the airport. Her partner, Lonnie Benson, remains at large. Holy shit, Lexi whispered. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Catherine, Lonnie's voice was desperate. Please, I need your help. Interesting choice of words, I replied coldly. Considering you said I was nothing but a burden. Baby, I was wrong, so wrong. Vanessa, she manipulated me. She used me to get to you, to the company. I see that now. Where are you, Lonnie? I can't say, but if you could just loan me some money, help me get out of town. You mean help you evade arrest? I caught Camden's eye, and he nodded, already dialing someone. Keep him talking, he mouthed. Catherine, please, for old time's sake, remember how good we were together. I remember everything, Lonnie, including how you left me with nothing but a note. I'll make it up to you, I promise, just... His voice cut off abruptly. In the background, I heard, FBI, hands where we can see them. I ended the call, hands shaking slightly. Camden put his arm around me. You okay? Better than okay. I straightened my hard hat. Let's get back to work. This place isn't going to renovate itself. The rest of the day flew by in a blur of decisions and meetings. By evening, I stood in what would become the main therapy room, watching the sunset through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It's really coming together, Camden said, joining me. Victoria would have loved it. I touched the wall, feeling the smooth texture of the new paint. She always said our spas should be more than just luxury retreats. They should be sanctuaries. Speaking of sanctuaries... He hesitated. The realtor called. Your old house sold. I nodded. After everything that happened, I couldn't stand living there anymore. The proceeds would go to the new charitable foundation I was establishing. helping women rebuild their lives after similar betrayals. Ms. Catherine, Maria from HR appeared. The first group of apprentices is here for orientation. In the conference room, 20 women sat nervously, many bearing the invisible scars of broken relationships and shattered dreams. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in my own mirror not so long ago. "Welcome to Victoria's Secret Gardens," I began. "I know what it's like to feel lost, betrayed, worthless, but I also know what it's like to rise above it. This program isn't just about job training. It's about reclaiming your power." One woman raised her hand. "We heard about what happened with your husband and that socialite. How did you stay so strong?" I thought about Victoria's hidden inheritance, about Lexi's redemption, about Camden's unwavering support. By remembering that our worst moments don't define us, our response to them does. Later, as I packed up my office for the day, Lexi brought in the evening papers. The headlines screamed about Lonnie's arrest and Vanessa's impending trial. "Quite a day," she said, setting them on my desk. "Quite a month." I looked at Victoria's portrait. "But you know what? I wouldn't change any of it." "Really? Not even the painful parts?" "Especially not those." I smiled, gathering my things. Sometimes you need to be broken down completely to build something better in your place. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make Victoria's legacy proud. But for now, I was exactly where I needed to be. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived for Vanessa's trial. 6 months had passed since her arrest, and the media circus hadn't died down one bit. "Ms. Catherine, any comment on today's proceedings? How do you feel about testifying against your ex-husband? Is it true Vanessa Clark threatened you?" I pushed through the crowd, Camden at my side acting as a buffer. Inside, Jarrett waited by the security checkpoint. "Ready?" he asked, straightening his tie. "Born ready." I smoothed my navy blazer, Victoria's favorite, found in the back of her closet. "Is he here?" "Lonnie's being brought in from county. Vanessa's already inside with her lawyer." The courtroom was packed. I spotted Lexi in the gallery, who gave me a small wave. She'd be testifying later about Vanessa's manipulation and schemes. As I took my seat at the prosecution's table, the side door opened. Vanessa entered in an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from her designer dresses. Our eyes met briefly. The hatred in her gaze could have melted steel. "All rise!" The proceedings began with opening statements. I half listened as the prosecutor detailed Vanessa's financial crimes, my attention caught by movement at the door. Lonnie was being led in, also in custody orange. He'd lost weight, his once perfect hair now unkempt. The prosecution calls Catherine to the stand. Walking to the witness box, I felt surprisingly calm. Months of preparation with Jarrett had readied me for this moment. "Please state your name for the record." "Catherine Marie Benson. And how do you know the defendant?" "She had an affair with my husband while attempting to illegally acquire my family's company." Vanessa's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. "Tell us about the events leading up to March 15th. I detailed everything. Finding Lonnie's letter, discovering Victoria's inheritance, uncovering Vanessa's scheme. With each word, I watched Vanessa's composed facade crack further. "Did Miss Clark ever threaten you directly?" "Yes. At the charity gala, she—" "Objection!" Vanessa stood up suddenly. "She's lying. This is all because she couldn't keep her husband satisfied." "Miss Clark, control yourself." The judge banged his gavel. "Tell them, Lonnie." Vanessa turned to him. "Tell them how Catherine trapped you in that boring life." Lonnie wouldn't meet her eyes. Or mine. "Remove Ms. Clark until she can compose herself," the judge ordered. As guards led Vanessa out, she screamed, "You think you've won? You're nothing. Nothing." During the recess, I found Camden by the water fountain. "That was intense," he said, handing me a coffee. "Did you see Lonnie's face when Vanessa lost it?" I couldn't help smiling. Karma really is a spectacular thing. "Catherine," Lexi approached cautiously, "they're ready for my testimony." You'll do fine. I squeezed her hand. Just tell the truth. Back in the courtroom, a calmer Vanessa had returned. Lexi took the stand, visibly nervous. Ms. Benson, please describe your relationship with the defendant. She befriended me to get information about Catherine and Victoria's secret gardens. She told me she'd make me a partner in her investment firm if I helped her. And did you believe her? At first, but then I found documents proving she was lying to everyone. She never intended to honor any of her promises. Vanessa's lawyer tried to discredit Lexi's testimony, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, emails, recorded conversations, it all painted a clear picture of calculated deception. The final blow came when Lonnie took the stand. Mr. Benson, did Ms. Clark instruct you to marry Catherine to gain access to her family's business? Lonnie's voice was barely audible. No, that was real, at least at first. When did things change? He glanced at me, then quickly away. Vanessa approached me 3 years ago, said she knew about my gambling debts, promised to help if I helped her get close to Catherine's family. You son of a bitch, Vanessa hissed. The judge called for order as Vanessa's lawyer desperately tried to damage control. But the truth was out, and nothing could put it back in its box. Hours later, I stood on the courthouse steps again, this time facing the reporters by choice. Ms. Catherine, what's next for Victoria's Secret Gardens? We're expanding our community outreach programs, I announced, including a new foundation helping women rebuild their lives after domestic abuse and financial fraud. Sometimes, the best way forward is to help others find their way too. As the cameras flashed, I caught sight of Vanessa being led to a prison transport van. Our eyes met one final time. I smiled and waved, channeling every ounce of Victoria's elegant grace. Behind me, Camden chuckled. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Maybe a little. I turned away from the van. Come on, we have a foundation to build. The future stretched out before me, bright and full of possibility. Victoria would have been proud. 1 year after the trial, I stood on stage at the grand reopening of Victoria's Secret Gardens' flagship location. The renovation had transformed it into something beyond even my dreams. A perfect blend of luxury and healing. Today marks not just a reopening, I addressed the crowd, but a rebirth. Every woman who walks through these doors will find more than just spa treatments. They'll find hope. The audience applauded as I cut the ribbon. Camera flashes lit up the morning air. In the front row, Camden beamed proudly, while Lexi dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. And now, I continued, I'm honored to introduce our first graduating class of the Victoria's New Beginnings program. 20 women walked onto the stage, each wearing the spa's signature uniform. These were the same nervous faces from that first orientation, now transformed by confidence and purpose. Sarah, one of the graduates, stepped up to the microphone. A year ago, I was living in my car after leaving an abusive relationship. Today, I'm a licensed massage therapist and the new assistant manager of the wellness department. More applause, more tears, more hope. After the ceremony, during the reception, Jarrett pulled me aside. Have you seen this? He showed me his phone. The headline read, Lonnie Benson released early for good behavior. I heard. I sipped my champagne. He sent me a letter last week. And nothing. That chapter's closed. Speaking of chapters, Camden joined us, grinning. Tell them your news. I blushed. The publisher accepted my book proposal. Rising from the Ashes, A Guide to Rebuilding Your Life, will be out next spring. Victoria would be over the moon, Lexi said, appearing with a plate of hors d'oeuvres. Remember how she always said you should write? She said a lot of things that turned out to be right. I touched the locket around my neck, Victoria's, found in the safe behind her portrait. A commotion at the entrance caught our attention. Robert, the board member who'd supported me from the start, rushed in. Catherine, turn on the news. Someone grabbed the remote, and the reception's massive screens flickered to life. A reporter stood outside a federal courthouse. Breaking news. Vanessa Clark's appeal has been denied. Additionally, new evidence suggests her financial crimes extend further than initially thought, potentially adding years to her sentence. Well, Camden raised his glass. Here's to karma. The party continued, but I slipped away to Victoria's old office, now mine. The city sparkled beyond the windows, just as it had that first night I'd taken possession of my inheritance. A knock at the door. "Catherine?" I turned to find Sarah, still in her graduation robe. "Everything okay?" "More than okay." She twisted her hands nervously. "I wanted to thank you, not just for the program, but for showing us it's possible to start over. You did all the hard work. Maybe, but you showed us the way." She hesitated. "There's someone here to see you, in the lobby." Curious, I took the elevator down. The lobby was nearly empty now, most guests having moved to the reception area. But one person remained, standing awkwardly by the fountain. Lonnie. He looked older, greyer. Prison had stripped away his polished exterior, leaving something raw and uncertain. "Catherine." His voice cracked. "You've done amazing things here. What do you want, Lonnie?" "To apologize. Really apologize, not like before." He shuffled his feet. "I read about your foundation in the paper, the women you're helping. It made me realize how wrong I was, about everything." "Thank you for saying that." I kept my voice neutral. "But if you're looking for forgiveness..." "I'm not." He shook his head. "I don't deserve it. I needed you to know that you never held me back. I held myself back, and I'll regret losing you for the rest of my life." Before I could respond, Camden appeared at my side. "Everything all right here?" Lonnie's eyes darted between us, understanding dawning on his face. "I should go. Just congratulations, Catherine, on all of this. You deserve it." We watched him leave through the grand entrance. Camden squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "Perfect." I smiled, meaning it. "Let's get back to the party." Upstairs, the celebration was in full swing. Our graduates danced with their families, board members mingled with shelter workers, and Lexi was giving tours to potential donors. I looked at Victoria's portrait on the wall, at her knowing smile. She'd seen this potential in me long before I'd seen it in myself. "Thank you," I whispered to her image. The locket around my neck felt warm against my skin, like a gentle reminder. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. And I was just getting started. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Victoria's secret gardens as I walked through the quiet halls before opening hours. My heels clicked against the marble floors, the same sound I remembered from visiting Aunt Victoria as a child. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Vanessa Clark denied early release. Additional charges filed. "Someone's having a bad morning," Camden said, falling into step beside me. He handed me my usual coffee. "Ready for the big announcement?" "As ready as I'll ever be." In the main conference room, board members and employees gathered. Robert winked at me from his seat. Lexi stood near the podium, reviewing her notes one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "when I took over this company, I made a promise to honor Victoria's vision while forging our own path forward. Today, we're taking another step in that direction." Lexi stepped up, clicking through presentation slides. "Our New Beginnings program has achieved a 92% success rate. We've helped over 200 women rebuild their lives. And now we're expanding." The room burst into applause as we revealed the plans for 5 new locations, each with integrated training facilities and transitional housing. "But that's not all," I continued. "We're launching the Victoria Simmons Scholarship Fund, providing full university tuition for survivors of domestic abuse and financial fraud." More applause. More tears. Sarah, now our head of community outreach, hugged me tight. The door opened. Jarrett entered, carrying a thick envelope. "It's done," he whispered, handing it to me. I opened it right there, in front of everyone. The documents inside represented the final victory. complete ownership of Victoria's secret gardens, with ironclad protections for our charitable programs. To Victoria, Robert raised his coffee cup. And to Catherine, who proved that success is the best revenge. After the meeting, Camden found me in Victoria's garden, the rooftop sanctuary she'd created for quiet reflection. "Penny for your thoughts." He sat beside me on the marble bench. "I was just thinking about that letter Lonnie left me. You've always held me back." I touched a blooming rose. He was so wrong. I wasn't holding anyone back. I was just waiting to bloom myself. "Speaking of blooming," Camden shifted nervously, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Before he could continue, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Catherine?" Lexi's voice was urgent. "Turn on the news, now." Camden already had his tablet out. The headline made my breath catch. "Former socialite Vanessa Clark attempts prison escape, found unconscious in utility tunnel." "I guess karma wasn't finished with her yet," Camden mused. "No," I smiled. "I suppose not." We walked back inside, where the day was in full swing. Women filled the halls, some in spa robes, others in business attire, all part of the transformation this place represented. In my office, I found a letter on my desk. The return address was the state prison. "Another one from Lonnie?" Camden asked. "No." I opened it carefully. "It's from Vanessa." The letter was short. "You won. I hope you're happy with your perfect little empire of broken women. But remember, everything that goes around comes around." I laughed, feeding the letter into the shredder. "She still doesn't get it, does she? This was never about winning or losing. It was about building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal." "Speaking of building something," Camden took my hand. "What I was trying to say earlier. Catherine, will you—" A knock interrupted us. Sarah stood in the doorway with a group of new program participants. "Sorry to interrupt, but these ladies wanted to meet the woman who started it all." I looked at their faces, nervous, hopeful, determined. Just like I'd been that day I found Lonnie's letter. "Welcome to Victoria's Secret Gardens," I said warmly. "Let me tell you about a woman named Victoria, who taught me that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as our worst moments." Camden squeezed my hand, understanding his moment would come later. This was more important. As I shared Victoria's story, and mine, with these women, I felt the final pieces click into place. The betrayals, the pain, the victories. They'd all led here, to this moment, to these lives I could help change. Victoria's portrait smiled down at us, that knowing look in her eyes. She'd seen it all along. The strength I had inside, waiting to emerge. I touched the locket around my neck, feeling its familiar warmth. Some people might call it revenge, this empire built from betrayal. But I knew better. This wasn't revenge. This was redemption. And it was beautiful.